we have an idea and all these people say, we'll help you make it actually happen. And then the thing that we want to make happen the way we want it happens. And, we hire the people, we see it come to fruition. So that's a really cool, very big privilege.
My name is Ben Charland. You're listening to What on Earth is Going On. My guest this week is Toronto-based actor and comedian Aurora Browne, who's the co-host of The Great Canadian Baking Show, but you probably know her as part of the ensemble of the Baroness von Sketch Show, and we do talk about that program in this episode. We also talk about gaming, whether it's video games, that is a really big thing for Aurora, or Dungeons and Dragons, which she plays with her family, and we talk about right off the bat. We do talk about acting and comedy, what it takes to produce a TV show like the Baroness von Sketch Show. We talk about peak television and the golden age of access, work versus play and how those two things intertwine. We spend a lot of time talking about Aurora's favorite book, Lord of the Rings, about religion, protecting the oceans. We even talk a little bit about me, my story about how I learned to drive manual in the United Kingdom, driving a moving truck. It's not my favorite story because it doesn't make me look very smart, but it's still kind of funny and I think worth talking about in this conversation. Now, if you like this show, please give it a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast provider that you use. You can also go to the website, whatonearthisgoingon.ca, to find all previous episodes, as well as links in this episode to things that we have referenced, such as the television shows, the video games that Aurora plays, and some of the ideas that we reference. Also, on the website, you can find ways to reach out to me directly by email or on social media. Let me know what you think of this episode or any other. Let me know what ideas, what questions this churned up for you. And finally, and as always, let me know what on earth you think is going on. Aurora Browne, let me start that again. I'm too excited to talk about D&D. Aurora Browne, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Ben. I'm very happy to be here.
I'm very happy to be here with you in your home.
Yeah, you're in my house. We're in the cozy corner of my living room with plants all around us, and the Christmas tree is still up.
Yeah, which is totally fine.
Yes.
It's only June.
It's because of the lights. At night, it just looks really pretty. So.
It's cool. No, we were saying before, why end Christmas arbitrarily on some day called Christmas?
I mean, probably the fire hazard, but the tree itself
that's
and
a good
the lights.
point.
Yeah. Anyway, I won't invite knock.
Before we started this recording, we were talking about Dungeons and Dragons and how cool your family is. You play D&D as a family.
Yes, we were talking about the room that we're in and how I cleared off the dining room table, which for several days has been covered with our family Dungeons and Dragons game. Because
you were afraid I would judge you when I walked in.
Mostly it made us look like hoarders because we just had all these little things and piles of papers and all the die. So, yeah, we've been playing that. My husband is a dungeon master because he's been getting into a game that he's been doing with other friends. And they're actually recording a podcast for that. We're in a weird Russian doll podcast situation. And then we've been getting into it. And it's also good because my son is just really solidifying all his math skills. So all the addition and subtraction and worrying, all that kind of stuff is really, really good for that.
What about the aspect of role playing and being another person in another world? Is that good for growing up?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have no idea internally what little wheels are clicking in Sebastian's mind, but I do know that when we're role playing, he'll make choices that we didn't anticipate that, we realize he has a really high sense of empathy and helping people and generosity. And at one point, and we're not a religious family at all, but at one point he's like, let's do a prayer for, some character before we go out. And he just kind of closed his eyes and gave this like kind of Lord of the Ringsy, type invocation of something. And my husband and I are just looking at each other like, who knew? So that is kind of cool. I don't know what it means for his future, but it's really fun. And I mean, obviously, me and my husband are both actors and we're improvisers and sketch comedians. And so role playing is what we usually do. This is just, codifying it and putting numbers with it.
Not to do too early of a segue, but do you think that there's a like a lot of theater people do Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
Partly because of that, but there's the imaginative element too, like especially if you're creating your own world and just having the freedom to make something up, whether as a dungeon master or as a player. But do you think there's a connection like between the skill of this game and the skill of doing work in the theater or television or film?
I think that the skill, actually my husband and I, we were talking about this last night. The joy of Dungeons and Dragons is that you can plan a story, you can put out your the setting, and you can put all the details ready for people to discover. But at the heart of it is this unknown quality of the dice rolling, that you never really know what's going to happen. And that's what makes it exciting. Like the moment you say, like, oh, I don't like that roll, let's roll until I win. It's like, that's not it. The little agreement that you make within yourself to go with whatever the dice gives you is what makes it kind of thrilling. And that is the same thrill that Chris and I get when we're doing improv, because you go out on the stage and you really have nothing, and you might have one idea for who you are, and you might say something, but you have to be ready and to go along with it. So that sounds so nerdy. Like, well, it's also about yes-anding the universe, but it is. It's, I think it's, it's cool to say I'm not going to control everything, that, anything can happen.
Well, I think it's even true that obviously if you're improvising and you've got a couple of partners on stage, they may be a security for you, but there's also the sense that something else could happen, that someone in the audience could say something, or something that you don't have control over, or even that basic sense of control that at least someone else and trust is controlling it.
Yeah.
And that's like a dice roll that you really don't know. And if you roll a 1 and you fall on your ass in the game, that's what happens.
That's what happens. And this sounds as if we planned this, but of course, like I was thinking, when I was waiting for you to come over, I was thinking back to Clown Camp that you and I took together, because like I think that the whole, we took this little, for those listening, it's called Baby Clown. It's a very, very introductory clown course. And I think the main thing he was trying to help us get into was paying attention to what's really happening. Yeah. That you can never get lost in, your personal imaginings of what's happening on stage. That if something happens in the room, you have to admit that everything is happening. Acknowledge everything happening in the room, so that everybody knows that, like, this is really happening, people, and that it just lends that kind of weight to being in the audience. And so all that stuff is just like that, being lucid. When you have a lucid dream, you're like, oh my God, I'm here. Like that you're kind of trying to do that all the way through. Yeah,
that was on Manitoulin Island. There was the John Turner's Mump and Smoot, the clown farm. Yeah. I think it's called the Manitoulin Island Center for Conservatory
Conservancy for the Arts. Yes.
Yeah. And that lesson about paying attention to what's really actually happening in front of you was something that I hadn't learned yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if I mean, you were coming with some experience when you came there. You'd done Second City.
A bit, because improv it does encourage that, but not all improvisers master that. Even there's some people, and there's a level to it that clown kind of like takes you all the way through the audience. You can't really ignore the audience.
Yeah.
Plus, that was such a magical time.
Totally.
It was 3 weeks in that barn. Like, I don't know about you, but when I was driving away from it, I felt my heart hurt. Like, I felt like, I'd just like opened up, and you'd get this like magical ball of energy going, and I could almost feel like physically the tug. Yeah. I was in a really, like, the next 2 days, I think, when I came home, I only wanted to talk to my friend Dave Tomlinson, who's also in clown and knows exactly what I'd gone through, because I didn't want to disturb the memory of the whole thing. I just wanted to sit in it. But it was quite something. It just stayed with me.
Yeah, it was an extremely powerful experience, in part because he's built it to be that.
Yeah.
John has been doing this. I mean, now that was 11 and a half years ago. We were talking about how long ago that was. But you feel like you're in a safe incubator to learn these lessons, right? Learning the lesson of attention, and learning the lesson of paying attention to who you're with, but also what's really going on, which for John is, as he called it, the gift from the gods. Yeah. Like the dice roll. Like a 1, if you roll, I mean, Dungeons and Dragons is a dice between 1 and 20 usually, and a 1 is bad and a 20 is really good. A 1 can be bad news, and for the character, it is bad news. But for the person playing and for the person watching, it's great news. Mm-hmm. It's exciting. Which makes then everything can be great news.
Yeah.
Like a tragedy on stage can be terrible, terrible news, but wonderful to watch.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm an actor, and I'm also doing sketch comedy, and anything that kind of helps me, be open to all that at work is great. And it's funny, you say like it becomes like the way chance speaks to you. Like this is getting super, super highfalutin, but yeah, the gift from the gods. It's like for me as an atheist, like the closest I'll come to like having faith in a thing, which is like having faith in chance will give you something.
Right.
And I guess, yeah. So I worship the dice, man. I worship them. They never steer you wrong. It's all
Well, a lot of people treat like theater and performance as like a temple. As not a religious art form, but something spiritual. Mm-hmm. And there's no doubt in my mind that the best experiences I've had both in the audience and on stage and in training, whatever, in the theater, were they had to be the same spiritual experience that a religious person experiences when they're at prayer or when they have a higher calling or whatever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it's necessarily dogmatically true. It just means that I think it's accessing the same part of the brain and the spirit and the body.
Oh yeah, just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you don't feel feelings of awe and wonder and connection. You just don't have a theocracy inside your head. But that same feeling of like, oh yeah, like there are definitely times I'm like, if there's anything to be connected to, I feel connected right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned work. Does it still feel like work?
It is a lot of work because I guess, it's like 98% work to get all the things arranged so that I can play in that
for
2%.
That 2%.
Yeah. And that involves like certainly in the last few years in my career with Baroness von Sketch Show happening. And then I had some other things happening at the same time. I had a web series I did with my friend Nadine DeJury and called Newborn Moms. And both of those, suddenly I was like executive producer and having like a whole lot of work that you don't normally have when you're just an actor. So we're writing the stuff and we're producing the stuff and we're hiring the people and, getting the people to then, do the production stuff that we don't know how to do, all the technical things and rehearsing and making sure blah, 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 and the notes. And then at the meantime, thinking about all the promotional stuff and trying to think large picture and da-da-da. And all that happens at the same time. So I've had to kind of, fake it till I make it to do all that and enjoy all that part so that by the time I get to the 2%, which is, the action, I don't feel exhausted by everything else. And luckily I do. I mean, I love the job. Like I love learning about everything. And then, after we work, we're editing right now, actually. We shot season 5 of Baroness and then now we're in the edit suite and I love that part of it too. And so it is work, but it's work I really enjoy because then it's playful. And it's also in service of playfulness.
Right, and it's interesting because that 98% is in a way in service to the 2%, but luckily you still enjoy the 98% in and of itself.
Yes. Yes. Sorry,
sorry, my question was too quick for you to drink your tea.
I'm just trying to be really super.
It's okay. I'm going to ramble on for a little bit while you drink your tea there. About your Christmas tree. No, it's an interesting idea because I think we try to make that 2% 100%. I think that often we think that that's the whole game and that if it's not as fun as that 2%, then there's no point in doing it. But we don't realize that sometimes we have to lay the tracks in front of us to drive the train over them.
Yeah. What's that is do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. It's like, which is not true. You will totally work. Yeah. And there's tons of times. We used to have these things. I had read somewhere that the quality that distinguishes millionaires, although those are a lot more common these days, but from people who don't become millionaires is that rather than waiting for somebody to do something for them, they all exhibit a willingness to just get done, like to see what needs to be done and make it happen. And so there were a lot of times in the first part where we would be doing like just the most basic organizing kind of stuff for ourselves, like 3-hole punching scripts. And we were like, this is a millionaire moment. It's a millionaire moment. And eventually we did get people to help us to do that part of things. But it's also your job to as the creators to just kind of keep your mindset clear, that no matter what you're doing, to keep your sense of curiosity and creativity alive always. So you just kind of do whatever you have to do that, which for me involves, like playing video games at night or watching Succession or whatever it is.
I haven't seen that, but I've heard it's really good.
Everybody was losing their mind about it in the fall, and I was like, don't talk about it. I haven't seen it yet, and clearly I need to. And I have this big kind of void in my life where Game of Thrones used to be.
Right.
And so Chernobyl filled that for a little bit, but that was only 5 episodes, and so I've had a few things there.
How important is that to kind of have that release valve?
Oh, it's essential. It's absolutely essential.
Why? Like, why do you think that is? I mean, I guess it's going back to what we were talking about earlier, that 2% and the 98%. Because when we watch a show like Baroness von Sketch Show, obviously we're seeing the 2% in action. We're like, oh, you guys are having so much fun all the time, because it's imbued with a spirit of humor, but also humor about yourselves, and it's just fun. It looks like it's enjoyable. And that seems like the valve in and of itself. Right? It seems like, well, why would you want to do anything like play video games when you could just do this all the time? Now, I guess I've done enough theater to know that there's something behind the scenes. But why do you think that we need another valve that's almost separate from that?
I should say partially. I mean, you're right, because my job is extremely rewarding, and there's nothing better, but there's very few things better than knowing that you're doing what you want to do and you're meant to be doing, and also the position that the four of us are in, which is we have an idea and all these people say, we'll help you make it actually happen. And then the thing that we want to make happen the way we want it happens. And, we hire the people, we see it come to fruition. So that's a really cool, very big privilege. But I think that it's, this is going to get kind of bare bones about it, but when you talk about people who are on, or people who fill a room, or they're watching them as this like big event, and it's tons of energy coming from the stage. And I do actually think that it does take a ton of energy to perform and do all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I think that if we have anything like, do we have auras maybe, or your electrical field that we all have around our bodies, that when you're performing, you kind of raise and widen that field. And if you're really good, like the really electric people, quote electric, but they kind of are, like they raise it to fill the room. And when you're in the presence of that, like you yourself feel transported, and everybody does. And that's where that magic kind of happens. And it's really exhausting. And, there's a ton of performers who, are well documented, who blow off steam with drugs or with stupid behavior or whatever. And so I just at the end of the day, I really, really need to go home and spend a few hours on the couch with my husband, who's also a big, beautiful nerd. And we just talk about all the stuff. And it helps the little sponge of my brain kind of unstick again. So, and at the same time too, I have to kind of keep up with, keep in touch with, what do I want to see on TV? What do I want to make? What would I want to see? I should know my audience, not just knowing what shows it is that people are watching, but how does it feel to be a person taking in media these days?
Right.
So I know it's look, people are going to be probably watching this on their laptop, and they need to see this, or, you have to get things out in the first 17 seconds because people will, or actually I feel a real urge to see people doing nice things for each other, or wholesomeness online somewhere in the world these days. You have to pay attention to who you are as a person taking everything in, because, if we're in anything, we're not just in peak TV era, and I hope that Baroness is a worthy entrant into peak TV, but we're also in the golden age of access. It's not just TV and video games, but when you're on Reddit for 2 hours, people are out there saying what they like. People are really funny. And I don't mean in the sense that like they have good premises that I use in my show. I just mean like they make me laugh. And you see people who find funny things and want to do nice things for each other. And what is everybody interested in? No matter what's happening politically, like people still love a good puppy video and just all that stuff. It's just, it's a way to kind of stay in touch that you wouldn't have if you were like a peasant in, medieval Britain.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned something, which is where do I fit in, or where should my voice speak in this milieu of television or whatever it is? And often a moment for an artist that's really revealing is, for example, a writer going into a bookstore and seeing a gap where their book should be. Not physically, but what's a book that hasn't been written that I should really write, that I want to write? And it's interesting because even though, as you just mentioned, there's this plethora of information and access and millions, podcasting, for example, there are 700,000 podcast shows, not episodes, but shows on Apple Podcasts.
Oh my God.
So obviously you look on, what are you going to pick?
Yeah.
How do you even find anything? It's like a needle in a haystack. Obviously you're going to pick what's probably recommended to you by the app or by somebody else. But in all of this, there's this feeling like, God, someone else is doing the same thing I am. But no, they're not.
Yeah.
And that's the important thing for any artist, is to realize I am unique. It may be a small, tiny sliver, but that's enough. Mm-hmm. And if I'm speaking what I know needs to be said, then there's at least an opportunity for me to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true that like the more specific you are, the more universal your appeal can be. And it's so true that like we have all this access. So, I'm kind of wondering if there's anybody like fan art of like the animals in Zootopia. Turns out there's 1,000 people who are also interested in that. And they've already been doing it, but so you have your community, but they haven't been necessarily doing it your way. And I think that it's so true that the more you pay attention to like what is true for me as a human, and, sometimes that involves therapy and like really being honest with yourself and whatever it is. But if you say something from your really unique perspective with like heart behind it, even if other people are different and everybody's different, but people inevitably can kind of tell like there's something authentic about this and there's something really touching about this, or wow, this is a new thing that I didn't know I wanted. That always is something that bothers me about people getting precious about who is cast as which part, particularly, when you see people getting angry that stormtroopers, there was a black stormtrooper, or there's this.
Oh, you mean like what type of person?
Like what type of person is doing it? But people get so mad about that, and it's like, and just at newness in general or uncomfortableness, and it does baffle me because I think like, aren't we always kind of excited by like some new thing we haven't seen before? Like, why wouldn't you want to see? It's like, oh my God, half the people of this population haven't been giving me their stories. Like, what else is in there? Like, show it to me. Like, because there's bound to be something amazing that you didn't know you wanted. And
well, and it's for you and I think that's a truism, but there's so many people that would strike them as odd. Having something different is exciting. Mm-hmm. Of course it is, obviously. Yeah. I want to hear the story that hasn't been told yet. What's more human than to be curious about what I don't yet know, or what I have not yet seen? Mm-hmm. And the stick-to-itiveness of just, no, it's always been done this way. This is small c conservative to a definition. That's what it is. And it's sometimes hard to understand unless you ask about safety and security. I guess it feels the world is a bit safer, more understandable when things are always the same. Mm-hmm. But the problem with that is that there are problems that will remain in place if you don't try something new. So if you're okay with all the problems, which I don't think anybody is, then I guess that's okay. I
think there are a lot of people who are okay with some of the problems.
Yeah, you're right.
If they don't think it's their problem, they don't have to look at that problem.
Well, I read recently that that's the definition of privilege, actually, is that when privilege is the ability to think that someone else's problem is not your problem. Yeah. That someone else's challenges day to day are not your challenges. Yeah. That, when someone else trips and breaks their ankle, no, it has nothing to do with you. That's actually privilege because you're lucky that you didn't break your own ankle. But when you do, you're going to want to hear their story and you're going to want to hear how they fixed it. And I think that's true with any storytelling. And it's a difficulty to enter into someone else's story sometimes because we don't understand them. But that's what a story does. Yeah. It's a bridge.
Yeah, totally. Well, we solved it, didn't we?
Well, that's it. Okay, well, we're 22 minutes in. We can end it there. We now have solved the problems of the world.
Solved everything. Yeah.
Now that we've solved the problem, what kind of utopia do we want to build? I think is the question. Do we want to have, green everywhere, Christmas all the time, 365 days in a year? Or?
Why not? Why not?
But you said it's a fire hazard.
It is a fire hazard.
Yeah, but so is like paper. So is your library.
Yeah, but I have the Christmas lights wrapped around the fire hazard, so it's probably something. But that's also like I dress it in like, oh, I just love it. It's so pretty. But I'm also it just means I haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, but some creativity is by accident, don't you think?
Yeah.
Like having a shower in the morning and having, by accident thoughts come. Okay, shouldn't I be sitting at my desk and processing these? But no, they always come when they're not supposed to.
I have something I totally want to ask you about, actually. I want to know what it's like to live in Whitehorse.
I'm not there yet.
You're not there yet.
Are you telling me that you looked at the website today?
Yeah.
I just changed it today.
Oh, no way. I was like, oh, he's now based in Whitehorse. Fantastic.
No, that's hilarious.
Oh, okay.
You're clearly a last-minute prepper. No, I'm totally joking.
I am.
I moved out of my place in Kingston yesterday.
Okay.
Literally yesterday, and I'm on the way now to Whitehorse. I'm driving there.
So this is a stop. You're driving the whole way.
Yeah. So my wife is already there. She started about 4 weeks ago, and I can't yet answer that question. I can tell you that she loves it.
Yeah.
And everyone who's ever been to Whitehorse either stays or tells you that they love it.
Yeah.
And but I can't personally tell you yet. So
what started this whole thing?
She got a job up there,
right.
So we're moving together to be where her job is. I guess is the best way to put it. And I work remotely, so I can be wherever.
Yeah.
But we've both talked about moving up north, and it's interesting because when we first got together, one of our earliest conversations was one of us said, "I've always had this weird fantasy about like going to prison." Not the bad kind of prison, not the kind of, rapey prison, but the prison where you're just kind of forced to sit in a room and focus on yourself or not focus on yourself. Just like have no distractions, no phone, no television, no socializing, no games, nothing. Get your work done. You got 2 years or whatever.
Yeah. Go
do something cool. And I don't remember who said it first, but then the other one of us went, me too. And then we realized, okay, we're kind of messed up. Maybe we should be together. But not.
Are you saying that Whitehorse is
I
prison?
Knew you,
I knew. About to
yeah, there we go.
Sorry. So I guess I'm not the first person. I'm just trying to think, like, why did he choose to tell me this story when we're talking about? Interesting.
Because I think for us, the idea of going north was to be in a place where there's less distraction and a chance to focus and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah.
And to live a little bit simpler for a while.
I mean, I certainly have the fantasy of moving all the way up there
to a prison. You want to live
not to a prison, no, to a house that will become an icy prison. For December, January. I was going to say, I sometimes do think about, can I make it go back to Thunder Bay at some point? But like that's quite a bit further north, and I don't know. It just seems to me, I picture it kind of like open and in sunlight all the time, just because there are, not a whole lot of trees, I guess.
Yeah.
And just kind of like being out of a lot of stillness in your life, I'm guessing.
I think that's a big part of it. I think there's also the sense, and now I lived in Kingston before, and there was a sense there that if you didn't go out on a Saturday night, it was okay because there's not that much happening. It's all right. But I've lived in London and Paris, and I spent a lot of time in Toronto, where my feeling is that if it's a Saturday night and you're at home reading a book, you are missing out. There is so much happening.
I've been missing everything.
Have you?
Oh my God, I'm such a hermit.
But do you get FOMO still, or are you over it?
I do a bit, but certainly when we had Sebastian, somebody's got to be home with him, and I realized that. I am a bit of a hermit. I do like the idea, like thinking about things. I like watching movies, but as I get older too, I get like more social anxiety. So I don't really want to go to parties or bars because the idea of being in a room full of people that I know slightly and will probably talk to a lot of them. And I can't just kind of like, I find like more and more.
Why more and more? Like, I totally get why you feel that. I share it. But
As I get older, I don't know if I'm just more conscious of it or it's getting worse. And I do so love my home. Like, honestly, like I said, at the end of the day, like sitting on the couch and smoking a joint with Chris Siddiqui is like the best way to end things.
Yeah.
And there's that laziness that happens as a person gets older. You don't want to stand in lines anymore. But yeah, some of it is just a voice that doesn't ever seem to go away, but I'm more acquainted with, I guess, which is like there's like a voice talking to me the whole time I'm talking to somebody in real life, and they're just saying, like, like that little voice telling me like how dumb everything I'm saying is.
Oh, yeah.
How self-involved and idiotic I must sound, and blah, blah, blah.
We all are.
Well,
I would assume that all good people have that. Maybe it's only the people who are kind of not so good that don't have that voice.
I think we call it a... You're right. We call it a disorder when they don't have it.
I think so. Like,
that's basically what narcissism is, isn't it?
Or narcissism, or maybe a form of sociopathy, right? Where you can't actually think about what the other person might be thinking. Because when I'm thinking about how dumb whatever it is I'm saying and how dumb it is, it's because I think you might think it's dumb.
Yeah.
It's not just me. Because if I'm sitting in a room, I'm not. Well, I guess I could be judgmental of myself.
Oh, I'm I'm well
wrong.
able to be judgmental of myself. Just sitting in a room. Look at you just sitting in a room, you lazy piece of shit. Look at all the things you could be doing around the house. Look at that project you started and never finished.
You suck.
Oh, God, nobody likes you. Just that. I find that happens. And there's nothing you can do to, I know, there's nothing I've found to do to stop it from starting. You can just kind of have various different, things to deal with it.
Well, and like notice the voice.
Notice the voice.
Like meditating. Like notice the thought, allow it to pass through you. Don't have to act on it.
Yes.
Just let it go.
You don't have to send that angry email.
Or write it. And what do they say? Write the angry letter and put it in a drawer. Don't send it.
Yes.
Yeah. That voice, I don't think that goes away. It's just interesting that like, It increases with time. Because for me, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. I feel like as nervous as a 14-year-old sometimes, and you'd think I'd be much more confident because I'm 47. You'd think.
Yeah.
Sorry, you.
No, but you'd think. No. I was gonna say you'd think that at 14, you think that will go away. Mm-hmm. It would suck to have your later self tell you, no, it's the same. No, hey, I'm 35. Yeah, it's just as bad.
Yeah,
you got nothing to look forward to.
Yeah,
yeah.
Now I will say, I have gotten better at is forcing myself, in a kind and loving way to engage, like when I have to engage with people, and also just to remind myself to like ask them questions about themselves. First of all, because that's like the number one, kind of high functioning mask that a depressed or anxious person can do is just ask the other person about themselves, because of course everybody wants to talk about themselves. So if you ask a person how they're doing and just ask a few questions, they will love it. So first of all, it takes the attention off you.
Yeah.
They're having a good feeling. Plus you get the kind of like nice sideways feel, like when your own attention is taken off you, it's like, oh yeah, maybe I could help this person. And like, I can't feel love for myself, but maybe I could feel generosity for this stranger.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a proxy.
What happens if you get a bunch of anxious people in a room together who all know that trick and all just do that trick and ask questions of each other, but no one ever answers
There's
them?
A lot of nervous tics. That happens. A lot of people saying, can I get you anything? Or, going for a smoke or whatever.
But it's such an important lesson. And it's not just a lesson for people who are self-centered or just want to talk about themselves all the time. Mm-hmm. It's just a natural safety for us is to talk about what we're comfortable with. Mm-hmm. And to ask someone else a question, going back to that idea of improv, is I don't know what you're going to answer.
Yeah.
I don't know where you're going to go. And to go into that unknown can be scary with somebody that I don't know.
I mean, it's always nice when you go to a party and you think, oh, I'm just going to have a little chit chat, and somebody says something surprising and something really true. Like that's a person, if somebody says something that has one of those two qualities, you start paying attention to that person, the party gets way more interesting. And that's, sometimes you're like, oh, I knew the first time I met my friend, she said this funny thing. And I was like, who's this? Or, whatever it is, just like paying attention. But I guess that goes back to what you talk about, people who like the new and people who don't like the new. I mean, I guess if your worldview is basically like the world is safe and something to be enjoyed, as opposed to the world is very unsafe and something to protect myself from, you wouldn't necessarily be always on the lookout for like who's the coolest new person that I can meet.
Towards the beginning of this conversation, we talked about leaving it to the dice or to the gods, leaving things to chance, and the power of that, not just for improvisation, but for creativity as a whole. Now, coming up in this chat, we continue to talk about creativity and one of the ideas behind the Baroness von Sketch Show, which is that you're not the only one out there who is weird, and the relief that comedy provides in letting you know that and showing you that you're not the only one. That's all coming up on this episode of What on Earth is Going On. I mean, we're all small c conservative in some ways. We all like some things the same. Some of us like to go to the same bed every evening. Some of us like to have the same person to talk to once a day or whatever. But that conservatism allows one part of us to be free to explore. It's like for me, like the things that are in my life that are stable allow me to be, well, not unstable, but adventurous in other places. For example, if you have a stable home life, you can go out and do creative work in the daytime.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an interesting balance that can be struck, but one can creep in too far, perhaps, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But that's everybody's struggle, right? Just
right.
To like, how much am I really living? Is my life too staid? Or do I have to like express myself or whatever? And that's when you put on Baroness von Sketch Show.
There we go. There's the pitch. We're halfway through. We've solved the world's problems 15 minutes ago, and now we're presenting Baroness von Sketch Show.
I will say that a lot, I think for all four of us, a lot of Baroness is us saying like, you're not the only one who's so weird. Like when people, like that little voice is like, oh, I did this thing or whatever. Like, I think a lot of comedy is there, or a lot of the laughter in response to comedy is like this like relief surprise of like, oh my God, I had no idea anybody else thought that, that there's a lot of, maybe the show is like an expression of asking people about themselves at the party, except it's like, hey guys, look at this funny thing, like this is how dumb we are. This is how weird we are. This is how shameful and hypocritical we are. Like, are you too? And then, so it's kind of like that. It's like having one of those conversations, except over the long term and in the Facebook comment section of our page.
But that's what's cool about it, is I think that you may show each other, hey, it's okay because I'm just as weird as you are. But that's also the experience I think that the audience has.
Yeah.
Is that, oh, these guys have the same bizarre, weird sense of humor, but they also notice the same things that I'm noticing.
Yeah.
And I think that's a truth, not just of you guys, but of sketch comedy, maybe of storytelling in general, of the sense that, oh, there is someone else who notices this. And it is really funny.
Yeah.
And it's okay therefore for me to feel this, or to either to feel anxiety about it or to laugh about it. And it not just gives permission for me to laugh about something, but it also just shows me that I'm sharing it with someone else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that, I think that's one of the greatest achievements of any performance, is to have that camaraderie with the audience, so that we are feeling like as if we're on stage with you, or as if we're in front of the cameras with you. Yeah. I
always feel like after a good improv set, like there's really nothing like a live night. And it's like, you've been doing like a hot set where like you and the people you're improvising with, it's like you've been reading each other's minds, and it's been silly, and the audience is like, just alive, and, it's like the air is golden, and everybody's in on that moment. It's like everybody's in the same jacuzzi together or something. It's like everybody's in the same oven. I always feel like there's like a heat to being on stage. And after I've had a good improv set, I feel as cleansed as I think people talk about after they've done meditation. Like, I've never been able to meditate and just sit quietly and watch my thoughts. But when I'm on stage and my clutch is engaged, and so I'm not thinking my brain is quiet and it's just where we are, right? I'm just thinking so for me, it's like a mental relief to be in the middle of an improv set, because my brain shuts up. And then at the end of it, it's like, haha, when we're all laughter filled. And isn't that interesting? I find the same often with doing these conversations, that at the, sometimes there's a certain anxiety, like, oh, did they get to say what they wanted to say, or
will anybody else appreciate the things that we were talking about but didn't actually mention specifically? Or did they have a good conversation like I did? Sometimes I go away feeling that. But a lot of the time I go away just feeling, oh, good. Like I had a good time.
Yeah.
Like the ball was passed by, like playing a sport.
Yeah.
Like having exercise. Oh, good. The ball was passed back and forth. I've released that. Mm-hmm. And and it's funny because we say the brain turned off, but we were using our brain. Like in improv, you're using your brain. Yeah. So it's almost like the editor part or the self-conscious part of it turns off for a while.
Yeah. I use the clutch analogy because I can drive standard. And all four of us in Baroness, that's a little known fact, all four of us can drive stick shift.
Really?
And all four of us have green/hazel colored eyes.
Interesting.
A little bit of trivia. But what I remember my mom telling me that you don't want to ride the clutch. You don't want to like press down the clutch too much because when the clutch is out, it doesn't like it. Like it damages a little bit. It would rather be engaged with the engine and working. And, when you're sitting in your apartment not really engaging your clutch very much, oh God, this sounds terrible.
No, it
sounds dirty.
When you're sitting in your apartment.
When you got your clutch engaged, you feel great.
But don't put your clutch too far back. Yeah. You'll damage the chassis.
Yeah, don't leave your clutch up for too long or it'll break.
But I've never thought of that before. Well, first of all, I didn't know that about the clutch being.
I could have that totally wrong.
I push it way down.
I'm a Virgo. I talk as if I know. I mean, but you have to do it. You have to do it to change gears.
Yeah.
But you just shouldn't stay there like ride the clutch too long. Like you shouldn't like brake by like taking the clutch out and just doing that. Like you want to do it easily and not spend too long on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like once you're a confident driver of a manual, then you can go back and you're not even really thinking about it.
And you don't even have to think about it. Isn't that crazy? You're like, how did I get up to fourth gear? And
do you remember when you first started driving a car?
I do.
And how much you had to think about every single step?
Yes. And I remember my dad on purpose taking me to a hill with not a crazy grade, but a bit of a grade so that, when you are going into first gear, it's the trickiest gear to learn. And at least when you're on level ground, the car's not moving, but you have to get it going as you start panicking. And, but yeah, I'm glad that I know that I can do that.
I learned to drive standard in the UK. On the other side of a road in a big moving truck.
Oh, so your left hand does the...
No, it's the... Wait a minute. The feet are the same. It's the driving. The gas is on the right hand side. Yes. The clutch is to the left of that. But the stick shift is on your right hand. Or your left hand side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that wasn't what bothered me. It was oh my God, it was a terrible experience. So I was living in London at the time in the UK.
Exciting.
And it was great. And I had a friend who was moving his stuff. I had to go to Manchester. I don't remember what it was, but I had to help this friend move. Yeah. And he didn't have a driver's license because in London, a lot of people don't have driver's licenses. Yeah. Well, I'm from Canada. I have a driver's license. And I didn't even think about it until like a couple days before. It's going to be standard in Europe. A lot of more vehicles, like I think the majority of vehicles are standard, but especially a moving truck.
Oh, yeah.
And so a couple days before, I'm like, I'm going to have to learn how to drive standard. So I looked it up on YouTube and Google and tried to learn in advance. I'm like, I'll be fine. Oh. So I do this. Yeah, no shit. I learned on the freeways of London.
Oh my God.
on the traffic circles of London. And so my friend was sitting next to me, freaking out because he didn't know how to drive, but he knew a bad driver when he saw one. And
he knew the sound of transmission dying.
Oh my God. I stalled so many times, like in the middle of a traffic circle.
Oh, the
worst. I learned pretty quickly how to get from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. But the worst thing is that this truck wouldn't downshift. So when you're driving a standard and you hit the brakes, like it'll automatically you can brake. It's fine.
Yeah.
There's something about you can't go from you had to go from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2 to 1 at a time. Or something in this truck. I can't remember.
You couldn't just brake.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's one of those like bigger trucks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know what that meant. But then, it's just a disaster.
You were a danger to yourself and others.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm amazed that I survived. But we made it to Manchester, made it back. By the end of the day, I could drive standard. And
Yeah.
but I learned by trial by fire. But that was crazy and stupid because I didn't know how much of it. Like I just thought, oh, it's just one extra step.
Yeah.
But starting a vehicle in standard when you've never started it before,
especially that kind of truck. I mean, it's one thing with just a car, but
and in London, like the traffic of
and people just honking and swearing,
freaking out.
Yeah.
And then, I couldn't hear them because my friend was screaming louder than they were.
Yeah.
So it was all fine. But that we listened to the song "Come On Eileen" like 40 times on that trip.
God.
Yeah, it was. I don't know why that was important to say, but
no, I think it sets the tone.
Yeah.
Just
so
lets everybody know how that was. So how did we get on to talking about driving?
We solved all the problems in the world.
Clutch engaging.
Engaging.
Yep.
What do you do at home when you're not engaging your clutch? I think was the.
Oh, what do I do? Oh.
No, that wasn't a real question. I think
okay.
that was, but you can answer it.
I mean, actually, right now, when I'm just kind of checking out, I've been playing this game. I mentioned video games before, but we have an Xbox and a PS4 and a Nintendo Switch. And right now I'm playing this game by this Canadian game company, Hinterland, that I think is based in Edmonton. And it's set in the Canadian wilderness, and it's a survival game. It's a sandbox game where you just, you can walk anywhere. I mean, they do give you quests to do. And you're constantly on the verge of dying because you have to keep, you're in a really cold environment that's pretty much abandoned by everybody, and all power has failed. And so you're just trudging through the snow from like place to place with the wind blowing at you and getting more tired and getting hungry and getting thirsty. And those four things, your temperature and your thirst and your hunger and your awakeness, you have to manage constantly. So you're always checking your environment for stuff. So for somebody like me who's a bit of a hoarder and a completionist, this is exactly the kind of game that I want to play because I just get to like walk around and discover things. And it's like you have to go up to the airplane crash site and recover food to feed the survivors, and so you have to go through and timber wolves are attacking you, and or you can just have a nice time just kind of like watching the Aurora Borealis overhead at night. And so that's what I'm playing these days.
That sounds really cool to me, and I hate to make this more philosophical than it probably needs to be, but that's just me. Why do we find that interesting? I'm not saying it's not. I find that fascinating. I love playing games, and I've talked about that a lot on this podcast. But what about that?
When you say
captivates us.
Do you mean gaming at all?
No, that specific game that you just described.
Well, I personally am attracted to post-apocalyptic kind of games. I think there's a weird attraction there for a lot of people.
Yeah,
like
especially in our world today.
Yeah, because we're, how would I handle it? Basically, it's like it's a version of that. Like, how would you win the lottery, or what would you do if you had to get out of town and like the shit hit the fan?
Yeah.
And particularly this game because it's set in Canada in winter, which I know well, and I flatter myself that I would know what to do. There's something about this game that's quite beautiful. And the gaming experience, like if you're a person who likes sandboxes and just kind of like wandering around environments, and this game is called The Long Dark, and that's a kind of a good way to put it. There's no fast travel in this game. You just have to go. The sound effects are really good. The snow crunches really well. Sound effects are important in games, I think. Like, you want to be taken into it. The look of this game is artful. You can tell that it's, they mean to let the brushstrokes show sometimes in the trees, but the way they have them move and the way the wind goes, it's quite real. It really evokes something. And I think, to be totally honest, I think anybody plays a game to feel something, like to feel excitement or to feel satisfaction when you finally get all the awards.
Right.
Or you've gotten every single enemy and the specific, satisfying crunchiness of the bones breaking and the explosions and the screams and stuff. Like, it feels like this completion. You feel like you're hitting all the bubbles and getting all the stuff. And in this one, I do like the sound and the soundscapes and the music and the danger, to be totally honest. I guess it's all those same things. but I don't know why I spend more time doing that than my dishes. I'll spend a lot of time organizing, all the clothes and woodworking stuff that I've picked up in the game, and I definitely have.
You might even wash dishes in the game, and yeah,
yes,
yeah.
I have laundry to actually sort in real life, but it's sitting on my bed right now.
Yeah, and isn't that interesting? And I think it's more than just the fact that, like, I agree with you. A lot of this is the environment of a game and the sound effects and the immersion in it and the sweetness of that immersion. It's not just what we expect to hear. It's an enhanced version of it.
Yeah.
And I think that there's something to do with story here. You mentioned rewards and meeting those rewards. And there's something that happens when you're playing a game where the most mundane thing becomes a sort of achievement. It becomes a building a block of that story.
Yeah.
The guy that made I don't know if you ever played the game Civilization.
I never did, but I know what it is.
Yeah, so Sid Meier was the guy that created it, and in an interview, he talked about how they had to decide very early to make it a turn-based game as opposed to a real-time game.
Yeah.
So, like a turn-based game like Dungeons & Dragons, where you have your turn, and then everyone else takes their turn and it comes back to you. And that was the revolution of that game, was that it was turn-based, not the real-time thing, which everyone thought it should be, and where games were supposed to be going. And what they realized only after they started developing, and I think after they actually put out the game, was that what people loved about Civilization was the planning of what was going to happen on my next turn.
Oh, yeah.
And 7 turns from now.
Totally.
And I think that in a sandbox game, like you're describing, for me anyways, the pleasure in organizing or the pleasure in doing the dishes is not just in doing the dishes. It's preparing for the dishes I'll be washing in 7 hours.
Oh, absolutely.
Or,
yeah. This game particularly because like you're always thinking like, okay, they say there's a storm coming, so I better pick up a whole lot of sticks and I have to get this in. And so you're always like the game is really happening in my head. For somebody sitting beside me watching, the way I can watch my husband play some of his games, I think it must look very boring. All they're seeing is, a person wandering, and they're not witness to all the thought process that's happening in my head.
Which is the magic of it for me.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm confused about like Twitch, for example, or people watching other people play games. I get it when it's like a sport. So StarCraft, for example, is like a sport for some people because a lot of these players are so good. They've been playing since they were like 2, and they've become so expert at it that you're watching virtuosity. You're watching someone show you how good they are. But a lot of gaming is just some guy who's never played this game before. He puts it in, and here we go. We're going to play this, and people will watch the whole thing.
Oh my God. Well, I'll sit and watch my husband's. Like, there's lots of games that I know really well, not because I've played them, but because Chris was playing them, and so it's partially because he's really good at certain things. Like he's really good at certain. At fighting, and I'm just kind of a button masher, but he's really good at that kind of stuff. So I can see him do things that I'm not capable of. And there's a lot of games that are so beautiful that I just enjoy watching them, or I relate it to my experience of gaming. But I'm specific. I'm quite selective about the things that I like, and it's kind of a small. I have to get really captivated by a game to get motivated to sit down and play it for several hours. And when I do, like, it's crazy. There was one day I played Fallout 3 for 10.5 hours in a row. And it got to the point where I would set the alarm on the stove in the kitchen so that it would buzz after an hour. So I would have to get up and just be reminded that time is passing.
Yeah. It's remarkable. Like, you don't even have to eat. I mean, there are extreme cases, obviously, where in Japan or Korea, people have played for 30 hours straight and then collapsed dead of exhaustion. This has happened. But for me, I remember playing games like, I played a lot of video games when I was a teenager. And I played like in sprouts from time to time since then. Computer games usually, like on an actual desktop or laptop or whatever. And I remember I could play like, wake up at whatever time in the morning. Let's say 7 a.m. wake up. And it'll be like 7 p.m. And I won't have done, like, I guess I've gone to the bathroom. Yeah. I will look down and no, I didn't go there. I must have gone to the toilet. But I didn't eat anything. Maybe I had like some chips that were lying around or something.
You just go into the state.
And you look at the time passing, you're like, I guess I'm not hungry. Just keep going. And it's that extremely powerful dopamine fix that we're getting. I think that's the neurochemical that we're talking about. But that that propels us into it. And it's only going to become more pronounced, this question of what's happening, because people are playing more and more, and the games that are being designed are more and more effective of keeping you engaged.
Yeah. Yeah, it's that. I mean, that's everything they want to do. I mean, it's funny, when you were asking about switching off. I think that I like playing games like this because it's just completely self-directed, and also there's no consequences. It's not like a real life thing. I really can let myself just have the experience of like, I kind of want to go over there. I'll go over there. And for me, also, I'm speaking as somebody who my job currently involves being in a really highly controlled, highly scheduled workplace where my body doesn't even belong to me during, when we're shooting, that's however many weeks and a few months of, getting up always at a different time, much, much earlier than I would normally do. You put on clothes, people are, putting stuff on your skin and doing stuff with your hair, and they'll be doing that and touching you all day long. And, you have to, to achieve the footage, we've got to do stuff in a certain thing and do it and in the scene and blah, and I've got to think of, other people. And so for me, gaming is a way to just kind of it's like getting out of a set of rapids and just being able to float in a little lake that's just really calm. And I could kind of go here and just having that nice experience of letting myself go where I want, as long as I want to, and then stopping, and just that ease and that floaty kind of easing quality.
And a certain sense of reasserting control. If not control, then at least reasserting a certain, no, I decide where and when I go. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, I'm not complaining about how tough my job is. I've certainly I've done much more physically demanding jobs, but just that, it's that regimented kind of thing. And I think everybody has that in their life where you have that time where there's something that you do or you watch or you go to that is your time. And for some people, it's going to hockey games, and for some people it's watching their thing, and Game of Thrones was that for a lot of people for a long time. And it was also exciting because it was the same thing. We were all kind of vacationing in the same island, so we could all talk about our vacation there. It's like, oh my God, did you see the thing? And that was another way to be connected. That's another thing that I'm really interested in when I talk about the age of access, how something that you watch, something that people like me would make for people, they watch it, but there's so much storytelling, and the experience of a piece of art can deepen with time because of all the things around it.
How do you mean?
Let me tell you what I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of Lord of the Rings. I've read it many times. I have the same copy that was in my family's house when I first read it, at whatever age, and I've reread it several times, and I love it. And I went to see the movies and mostly loved the movies, with some exceptions in the Two Towers, and bought the DVDs and, watched all the extras and listened to the movie with all the commentary on. And happily, my husband is also a huge nerd, so we talk about it kind of thing, and then we watch The Hobbit and you watch these other things. And you have that experience of it. So there's that, and it's a wonderful movie, all these things that I know about it when I'm watching. And then Peter Jackson puts out this other thing lately. I don't know if you've seen it yet. He put out this documentary called They Shall Not Grow Old, where he's taken World War I footage.
Colored it, right? Or
they fixed it. They've in the middle bit of the film, which is most of the film, but it's just the middle chunk when they're at the front. It's the sounds of voices of soldiers who were there.
Okay.
And footage there that they have meticulously gone through and restored, colorized, put realistic sounds to. But most importantly, they have synced them all up so that they're at the proper speed. So you go from watching footage that you're used to, the jumpy stuff, to suddenly bam, with a camera that is so real looking that it looks fake. It's surely that's not what a trench looks like. So you're just in the trenches with this footage that's actually been shot there, looking real to you now with your 2020 eyes, looking at footage, hearing the voices of these guys, and it deepens your understanding of what World War I felt like to be in a way that doesn't normally. And so he did that movie. So I've just watched that movie. So one of the things about Lord of the Rings is that he was in World War I. And there's, he's commented that there's some things specifically that are based on stuff in there.
Like that film Tolkien, which talks about
I
that
haven't
a little
even
bit.
seen it,
Right.
but I know that he said, like the dead marshes are based on, the bodies and that kind of stuff.
There's hints towards this in the film. I watched it on the plane, so it's hazy what I remember, but it hints towards how he created certain things, but it's not hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer.
No, he doesn't like allegory, but just the sense of it. So then that happens. So now, just recently, Chris found this guy who loves Lord of the Rings so much. He, on his own, not for any money, made a audiobook of the entirety of Lord of the Rings. He reads it aloud in an English accent. I'm not sure if that's his actual accent. It's a little shady sometimes, but he does it really well. And he does all the voices as close as he can to the people who are in the film. So when he's reading Pippin, you hear Billy Boyd. He's really good at it. He makes his voice sound like Gandalf. He makes his voice sound like, all the different people, like Treebeard. He puts in just some ambient sound effects. He puts in the music from the film. So
cool.
This is... And I guess my point is that, I thought that I knew Lord of the Rings, and I would say that I did, but hearing this guy, first of all, read it aloud, it makes your brain slow down and not speed read over all the longer descriptive bits or all the Elvish poetry, that kind of thing. So I'm hearing some words that I just kind of always skated by a little bit. So when I'm hearing the words of the novel, I'm hearing it a little bit more. Then I'm being also reminded what an amazing writer he is. And that it's not just what was in the film. It's like, oh, he left out stuff. It's like the whole thing is there. But you can picture all those actors and all that artwork and all that work that they did down in New Zealand in your mind, but with the whole story. Not just the bits they picked up, but the whole story, the incredible descriptions and all this kind of stuff. Plus, whenever they get to, whenever they're on the march, you suddenly realize oh, yeah, the guy who wrote this did long marches and was in battle and knew how to cook. So there's so many parts where, because I'm more closely engaged with World War I because of that documentary, I can just understand that part a little bit more. So now finally, after all this time, I've actually finally just found my favorite iteration of Lord of the Rings, and it's only possible because of the time and everything that we have. So it's like all these things that you have access to that Peter Jackson did, thinking about, this guy just did it, and it's my favorite. We just keep talking about it. Chris is listening to it, and I dip in and out because I'm more familiar with it. But it's a pleasure, and one that I didn't expect to have. At this point, I thought oh, the book is it, but no, actually, there's this form of it. So it's when I say it's the golden age of access, it really, really is. And
with access comes that additional context, right?
Mm-hmm.
That a truly good piece of art can only become better if we give it a different angle, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why people go into an art gallery or a museum and stare at a piece and move around and see it from different angles.
Mm-hmm.
It's not because they're just being a douchebag. They may be being that too. But some people are just faking it. Come on, there's nothing more to see. But a lot of the time, they're intimately connected with what they're looking at,
mm-hmm.
and they can go, and when they look side to side and they look at the tiniest brushstroke, it enhances their understanding of
mm-hmm.
the piece. In the same way that if I know nothing about a play that I'm going to go to see, that can be a wonderful experience to be a virgin in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also have a really incredible experience if I know everything about it.
Yeah.
Like the play Waiting for Godot by Samuel Beckett. I've seen that play many times. I've read it. I've studied it, whatever. So it doesn't matter how bad it is. I love watching it.
Because there's something new. It's going, just like every layer that's revealed, like an onion.
Like an onion. I was thinking that too, like an onion.
Yeah, and I guess that's, to bring it around again, to segue and tile the threads together, the same way that you can have a piece of art be richer for something else that happens, I guess in a way, that happens with life in general. As I get older, it's every time I reread this one novel, I realize new things because I'm getting older and I've got a new perspective. Having a kid gave me a deeper perspective on that part of works of art that have that involved. And I guess Baroness, the lucky thing with Baroness and I talk about it a lot, but it's
No,
kind of the central part of my life right now. It's most women that you see on screen are telling you something are telling you a truth from a younger perspective, maybe. Like most women that get put on screen are younger and doing all that kind of stuff. And but I guess what we're saying is what we're here to tell everybody is that life itself, like, as you get older, there's all these little moments that are deeper that we didn't realize now that we're in our 40s. Oh, we have more reports for you from the front of getting older. Like, hey, everybody, we found this thing. Yeah, it took us 47 years to get to this perspective, and it's amazing. So here you go. And I guess it's great that everybody said, yes, we're happy to hear what you have to say, instead of no, you're too old and you're probably not funny because of your body.
Well, that's what was in part so wonderful about the show once I thought about it after I first saw it. Mm-hmm. Because when I first saw it, I thought, that's Aurora. Right? That was my first thought. Yeah. And my second thought was, this is really funny. I want to watch more. And my third thought further down the road was, hey, they're all women. And then
perfect.
And then my fourth thought was, and then this is like probably months later, was, I guess they are telling me stories from an older experience that I'm used to seeing. Mm-hmm. You guys aren't old. But the women we're used to seeing in that context are 25.
Yeah.
Or they're made to look 25, or they're,
Yeah.
And so that was, all of those things were the layers of the onion that came later. But that was a nice thing, because that was the gap in the library. Mm-hmm. There was no book filling that gap at that time. And there still isn't. And that's a really nice thing.
There's so many gaps in all of our libraries. And it's like, and then when you're like, oh, yes, I'm getting the book. I'm getting this part of the story. Like, yes. Yeah. It's a great feeling.
Aurora, my last question was supposed to be my first one.
Oh.
Which is, what on earth is going on?
Oh, Ben, what is going on? I tell you. See, now that you've asked me that, I think of like the world in general. What's going on is that I wish I had Dr. Manhattan's superpowers and I could go and fix a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
That's.
What would you fix first? Or if you could fix one thing, what would it be?
I would, I guess I'd have to do it constantly, but I guess I would guard the oceans. I would go and specifically kill whaling, or, get rid of whaling boats. And for blue whales, if I had to choose one thing, because there's a whole lot of, once you go down the rabbit hole of like, oh, climate change things, what's causing it, blah blah blah. There's actually some things like, if we protected blue whales everywhere, their poo would feed the krill, and the krill, it would like it would help go a huge way to restoring the ecosystem of the ocean.
Like bees. Like if we got to the bottom of colony collapse disorder, we could protect ourselves from coming disaster. If bees all of a sudden just vanished because of this, we're screwed.
We're screwed. There are a few things that we don't really realize, and I guess that's, if I had to choose one, that's one thing I would do.
Cool.
Yeah.
One last thing. If there was one thing that we didn't talk about that you wish we did, what would that be?
Oh.
And if we had like another hour to dig into it, what would that be?
Oh my God. See, this is the kind of question you're going to ask me, and I won't know the answer until after you've actually left my apartment. I'll be like, oh, I can't believe I didn't talk about blank. There's so much to talk about.
No, we're not going to talk about it. Like, is there something on your mind that you're like, oh, I would like to dig in? Like, hey, what do you want to talk about day to day? Like, what is on your mind? Or did we talk about everything?
I love talking about religion, and I'm really curious about religion and how it takes a hold, where it lives in a person's mind and affects the decisions that they make. Because it's underneath so many of our decisions as human beings, and
often unseen. In the way that it underlies that.
Yeah. And I say that I would say I identified as an atheist, but I grew up Unitarian, but with a Catholic best friend. And when I watch religion make people operate, that's something I really could dig into a lot more.
Do you know what's cool about religion is that you can see it through the point of view of any other field, and recognize religion as our first attempt, our first shot at understanding something, our first shot at philosophy. And if we see it through that perspective, it's actually quite an interesting and eye-opening experience of what we were trying to say.
Yeah.
If we look at it through the lens of storytelling, well, what stories were we trying to tell 2,500 years ago? And not just historically. What stories are religious people trying to tell today? And what does that say about all of us?
Yeah. I think, and again, this is, I don't want to start the whole other hour, but I think it's boils down to us trying to express our ideal while being unable to escape the fact that we are garbage. We're the worst species ever.
I like that.
We are. We want to be gods. We model God on ourselves, and we're the worst thing. I guess that's my cynical.
There's a book by Yuval Noah Harari called Homo Deus.
Uh-huh.
Where he talks, so he wrote another book called Sapiens, which is really interesting.
I have heard about this book.
Yeah, so the sort of sequel to that is Homo Deus, and it's about how we are making ourselves into gods through technology, through evolution, and through the rapid progress. And Homo Deus being God-man, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's many hours of discussion. So
Many
if
more.
you want a reprise at some point, I'll come visit you in Whitehorse.
Or when I'm coming back after, being done with prison. Aurora, thank you so much for
Ben,
this.
Thank you. It's so nice to see you again.
Me too.
This has been so long. It's great.
Thank you. To learn more about Aurora Browne, go to the website, whatonearthisgoingon.ca. There you can find all previous episodes, as well as a way to get in touch with me by email or on social media. Let me know what you think of this conversation or any other. You can also go to Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast provider that you use, and make sure to give me a rating and a review. If you like the show, let me know what you think. Now, your quote of the week is from Albert Einstein, the eminently quotable Albert Einstein, and it goes, "Creativity is intelligence having fun." Thanks, as always, to our composer Andrea Wetstein, and thank you to Aurora Browne for allowing us to record in her home. Next up on the podcast, we're talking with former Liberal Cabinet Minister Kent Hare about politics, disability, and his hometown of Calgary. I'll see you then.